If it's on a train, there's a very likely chance that one of us actually had our hands involved with it at some point during its life. My name's Josh. I'm a 88U railway specialist. I've been doing that. I've been in the Army for about 5.5 years now. It's a reserve-only MOS. I've been in the reserves my whole time. My dad, he worked for the railroad for 32 years. And, I've always been kind of a train buff all my life. I'm like, my life is going nowhere. And so I'm like, you know what? I found out about it. I looked into it, and it was always kind of like a thought in the back of your head, but I never really actually looked into it. And when I decided to actually do it, I was wanting this MOS, or if they didn't have it, I was probably going to go into the Air Force active duty. They about 7-8 years ago, they merged all the original 3 rail MOSs were 88 uniform, which is railway operations crewman, 88 PAPA, which is railway equipment repair. So like you fix locomotives and rolling stock, and 88 Tango, which is track repair. So you go out and fix the tracks, and they rolled all 3 of those into one. 88U just became one rail MOS. It's a pretty unique MOS because it's a small MOS. There's not a large number of people that do it, but it's a very important MOS in the fact that just about every military unit in the Army move almost all of their equipment by rail, whether it be any sort of vehicles, ammunition, the whole nine. The good majority, if not all of it, is on a train at some point in time, which also means if it's on a train, there's a very likely chance that one of us actually had our hands involved with it at some point during its life. So we could either go sent out as a rail crew, and generally a rail crew consists of 3 people, an engineer, conductor, and a brakeman. A chunk of us are qualified as locomotive engineers through the Army. It's a certification you have to get in order to run a locomotive. Engineer runs a locomotive. Conductor's basically in charge of the crew, and the brakeman is basically a helper to the conductor. So we go out and we have a unit deploying. Like, we would help spot the rail cars up to the ramps. They would load them. We'd build the outgoing train, get it ready for the civilian railroad, and then we'd hand it off to them. And then they would have another crew waiting on that end to basically break the train down, spot it up, get it offloaded, and get those guys off to NTC. Or on the other end of what's going on is we could also send guys out as railroad track inspectors. I'm qualified as a railroad track inspector. It's a 2-week course you have to do. And same thing, go out. Generally, it depends on the needs of the mission. So I've been, just me and one other person. I've been out there with our whole unit. Generally, you go out and it is what the name implies, you inspect track. When you go through your AIT, they give you a basic understanding of railroad track, but when you do your track inspections, they teach you all the measurements, like how much a rail can be gapped, or if like bolts are missing, what's full compliance and what's, a restriction or out of service and stuff like that. You definitely do some interesting stuff. One thing that I really like about this is, no 2 missions you go on are the same. It's always different, no matter what you do. With the MOS, the AIT, it's 7 weeks in Fort Eustis, Virginia. And even our instructor said when we were going through it, he's like, you're just hitting the wave tops with this because there's so much information they're trying to cram into a 7-week period. Because the original MOSs, each one of them was about 7 weeks. So essentially they're trying to cram 21 weeks of training into 7 weeks. Outside of that, if you go for your engineer certification, that's 2 weeks in Fort Eustis. Track inspector, that can be done practically anywhere, but that's another 2 weeks. They have a civilian DOD crew that goes around and like inspects railroad tracks on posts and stuff. So they're the ones that actually teach it. Altogether, it's at least a couple months worth of training. Count your SLC, your ALC, and, your MOS schools and the job specific schools. It's definitely a hidden gem. We are almost entirely E5 and up. We got, in our unit, it's almost all NCOs and up. And then we have, I think, like 4 or 5 lower enlisted. We have 5 units, 2 in Illinois, 1 in Missouri, and 2 out east in Virginia. It's neat because people from units on the other side of the country. Everybody knows everybody. And because we're so small, the full bird knows the newest private by, sight and handshake. So everybody knows each other. I'd say it's a blessing, though. When units deploy, everything moves by rail because you can move essentially an entire battalion in one train. And it's efficient because, like I said, you can move 100, 150, 200 pieces of equipment on a train using just an engineer and conductor with 2 guys just to do that. Anytime you get ammunition, supplies, the whole 9, it moves by rail. It has a lot of ground to cover. And the railroad is really the fastest and most efficient way you could do it. You don't see convoys of tanks going down the interstate going to NTC. The pros of doing this by rail outweigh the cons by a long shot. It's just faster, easier, and more efficient to do it like that. We work with mainly the Army, but we have done work with the Navy because, believe it or not, behind the Army, the Navy actually has about the second amount of rail equipment. We've done work at Barstow, so we worked with the Marine Corps. I don't know if we've done anything with the Air Force, but I wouldn't doubt that we have at some point along the way. I would just be happy with more people knowing that it's there because it's in such an obscure corner and it's such a unique and interesting job because no 2 days are the same. There's always a variety. If you love variety, this is the line of work for you. You get to travel a lot. Like I've been 5 or 6 different installations. You travel around the country. I'm glad I got this MOS because it opened a lot of opportunities for me, even as a civilian at my civilian job. I'm a locomotive engineer, so I run the engine. The certification you get in the Army is the same thing. It's the same certification that engineers on the civilian side get. For me personally, it's opened so many opportunities that if I didn't end up going into it, I wouldn't have had. I would just be happy with more people knowing about it.